Okay, Mr. Bucky has agreed to do some stories for us, and I've agreed to make him some divinity if he will do some, tell some more of his stories.
Right.
Now, a lot of y'all requested stories by Mr. Bucky, so here we go. All right,
Okay.
Mr. Bucky, it's all yours.
All right. Well, I think I'll tell the first one when I was 5. I think maybe 6. I don't know. I think I was still 5.
So, what year was this? About
Oh well, it would have been
1942, 3?
1943. It was during the war.
Yeah, during the war.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, evidently, my mother and my grandmother, whom we affectionately called Gangi, were talking, and they had expressed the need for a loaf of bread. They needed a loaf of bread for some reason, and I overheard it, and I decided, well, I'm gonna go get that loaf of bread for them. Well, I didn't bother to tell them, but I took off. Now I didn't know the way by the street, but because all the kids played in the backyards, I had played with a number of the kids in the backyards. So I started going uptown, and what I was doing was climbing over fences. And I'd climb over one fence and climb over another and climb over another and go through people's backyards until I actually got to town. Now all this time, my mom and grandmother didn't know where I was. Well, I went on into town, and I knew where Henson's grocery was. Well, back then, the groceries were just little small town groceries. It's kind of like in a way, like a general store. They had the cookie jars, and all of the goods were on the shelf behind the counter and all that. So I just went up to the counter, and I think Mr. Henson recognized me, and he said, "Well, what do you want, son?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Henson, I want a loaf of bread. I've got to get a loaf of bread from my grandmother. She says we need a loaf of bread, she and my mom." And Mr. Henson said, "Well, why are you up here to get it? Why not, why didn't your grandmama come?" I said, "Well, they didn't come because they weren't going to be able to come right then. But I was ready, so I came on up here to get it." So Mr. Henson said, "Okay, son, well, you go ahead and carry your grandmother this loaf of bread," which I did. Well,
Now, did you climb back over the
yeah,
fences?
that's exactly
Well, you
the way I
probably
went.
squished the loaf of
Oh
bread
yeah,
time you
well,
got
I'm
home.
sure the loaf of bread was squashed, and I was all scratched up.
Oh,
I had some of the fences had vines on them and all that. So by the time that I finally got home, it'd been some time. Now, one thing that did help, Mr. Henson called the house and spoke to my grandmother and said that I had come up there and gotten a loaf of bread. So they were sort of expecting me, but it took a while for me to get back because all the fences, and by now I was sort of tired. But I finally got on back, and so they called me in. Of course, I brought the loaf of bread, and I said, "Here's the loaf of bread I heard y'all talking about." And they said, "Well, Bucky, what made you decide to go get the loaf of bread?" And I said, "Well, I just thought that that's what y'all wanted." I said, I went to get the loaf of bread. I knew the way." I said, "Yeah, how did you go to get the loaf of bread?" So I proceeded to tell them about some of the people, some of the kids' names that I knew. But at any rate, I went and got the loaf of bread. Now, the truth of the matter is that they were worried sick until Mr. Henson called them. And that's the only reason that they stopped worrying. But here I was. I was oh yeah, the loaf of bread was just smashed up. And I was all scratched up and dirty and everything else. But I went and got that loaf of bread. But now they did scold me. They scolded me. They thanked me for the loaf of bread. But they scolded me and said, "Don't ever do that again." So I thought that was a pretty interesting story. Now, you want to hear the one about going to the picture show?
Yeah, and I
Me
think I've
and
heard that
Crystal.
one. This is where you and Crystal went to
Yeah,
the second movie.
right. Well, we always went to the movies. When we were with at Ganges, we always went to the Saturday shoot 'em ups. And
The
we went
westerns.
to, yeah, some westerns. We talked about that the other day, about going to see Bob Steele and Johnny McBrown, Roy Rogers, and Jimmy Wakely and Lash LaRue. Buster Crabbe was another one. We went to see them all the time. And they had serials too. They had, I remember the Crimson Ghost, and they'd have chapters each week. So you didn't want to miss going to the shoot 'em up on Saturday. We went to some other shows too. I remember going to Sentimental Journey, where this girl had been kidnapped by the gypsies. And I also remember Lassie Come Home.
Oh
I
yeah,
went to
you
see
saw
that.
the.
Yeah.
Was that the one with Elizabeth Taylor in it?
I think so. It was.
Yeah.
It was.
So what year was this?
I don't know what year it was, but we went. From about the time I was 5 years old to about 8 or 9. I can remember all that.
Crystal, that was your cousin.
Yeah, the
she
older
was
cousin.
older than you.
She was my older cousin.
Yeah.
And
So she was the one that was sort of supposed to be looking after you.
well, here's what happened. Gongi let us out one Saturday and said, "Okay, now it's going to be thus and such time, and I'll be back to pick you up."
So she drove you in the car.
She did. She drove us up and dropped us off. And so we went on to the end of the movie. But the movie was very short. And so we got on out of the movie and we had a little bit of time. So Crystal says, "Well, I believe we can go to the other movie." Now it was a double, the cinemas were right together. There were just two of them adjoining each other. One was the Mullins Theater and the other one was some other name. But it was, we went to one or the other. But this time, Gongi knew which one we'd gone to. But Crystal says, "We can go on over there and we can get back out here just when Gongi's going to pick us up." Well, it didn't work out exactly like that. What happened was that we went on to the other movie, and we're in the other movie when Gongi came.
She came inside the movie?
Well, Gongi went first inside the other movie house where we were supposed to be, but we weren't there. So then she decided, well, I think she talked to the people there, asked about the movies and all, and went over next door, and so sure enough, the teller at the window had remembered us.
Y'all were in a really
Yeah.
small
Yeah,
town,
that's
right?
We were. And so she said, "Yeah, they came in to watch this movie." She said, I think they came in sort of in the middle of it, and we watching it as it's rerun now." And so sure enough, Gongi says, "Well, can I go on down there and get them, or at least speak to them?" And so she said, "Oh yes, go ahead." So anyway, Gongi found us. Well, Crystal always liked to go to the very first row.
Y'all sit on the first
Well,
row?
I think she had bad eyes.
Oh.
But anyway, we went to the first row, and there was where Gongi found us. And so Gongi was not pleased at all. So she was talking to us right up there. She said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do." She says, I'm not going to come back and get you. You're going to walk home, and I'll see you when you get there. But I'm expecting you very soon. I don't know when this movie's going to get over, but I'm going to give you another 10 minutes to get out of here and get home. And we said, "Oh, okay." We were pretty
y'all
scared
afraid?
then, yeah. But Crystal insisted on seeing the rest of that movie.
Oh my God.
Well, that was even longer than what Gongi had said. So we get out of the movie, and I think it had started to rain.
Oh my
Well,
God.
but anyway, we just walked on. Again, it was about half a mile to the house, and so we walked on, and Gongi didn't come get us. We just had to walk on, And when we got there, Gongi had a surprise for us, a nice big long switch.
Oh.
And so she gave Crystal the most licks with the switch
Now,
because Crystal was
did she
older.
switch you on the bottom of your legs?
Oh yes, and it hurt. But she didn't give me as many lashes as she gave Crystal. But we didn't ever do anything like that again. That was something else.
Now, this was during the time that you were staying with your grandmother.
Right.
You and Crystal were both just spending some time.
I
with her.
think Crystal. I don't remember whether maybe this was during the summer. I'm just not sure.
Yeah. Well, now was this during the time when your dad had tuberculosis and you were staying with Gongi?
Yeah. Well, it might have been. I
Yeah.
just can't remember.
So what
when
happened
it
with
was.
that? Y'all were living what, in Myrtle Beach or somewhere?
Well, we had been living in Greeleyville, a very small place. Daddy was superintendent of schools there, and there were several people at that time that had developed TB.
Tuberculosis.
Yes, had tuberculosis, and Daddy had had a small spot on one lung, and so he had to be in a sanatorium, and so he had to quit his job. And when he did, then Gangi offered for us to come and live with her during the rest of that school year.
So how long was your dad in the sanatorium?
About 9 months or so.
Oh,
It
my
was
goodness.
sort of about the same length of time as the school year, and the man on either side of him died
Oh my
on
goodness.
both sides.
Goodness.
But he came out okay. He was healed, thank God. And then he got another job at Coker College. But that's from there is where we went to Hartsville. Now you want to hear about that?
Yeah, you got a Hartsville story too.
Right. In the third grade, this is I think you've heard this. In the third grade, I had a teacher named Ms. Neely. Now, Ms. Neely was a very nice person, but she had given me an N for needs improvement 1 6 weeks grading period.
All right, now an N. So you had
It
a
was
different grading system
A,
back
B,
then?
C, and N and U, or S, N, and U.
So what the N was?
N was needs improvement, like A, B, C, of course, you understand.
Yeah, but
D
S
and
was
F,
satisfactory.
satisfactory, and U was unsatisfactory. Well, I didn't
And
get
what
it.
was the other one?
Unsatisfactory, U.
No, it was N
Eh,
needs improvement, S is satisfactory, and N and U is unsatisfactory. Okay,
But
got
they
it.
also use the ABC system for the main subjects. So in this particular grading period, this particular 6 weeks, I had gotten an N on needs improvement in math. Now, she had not given any kind of comment on the report card other than just the N. And so when I got home, I knew I was in trouble. So what I did was instead of showing that report card right promptly to my mother, I decided I would alter that grade.
You changed the grade?
Right, I did. I changed it from an N to an A.
Oh.
Now, it's pretty easy to do if you'll think about it for a minute. It looks
Yeah.
sort of similar.
Uh,
But anyway, I changed it to an A, and of course, they were very proud of my report card. I did well in the other subjects.
now,
as
did
well.
they had to sign the report card?
They
and
had to
send it
sign,
back?
one of them did.
Yeah.
And so whenever I showed it to Mother first, she was very delighted at my grades. And then Daddy came in, and he was very happy too. And he congratulated me and that kind of thing, and I guess gave me a little piece of spending money or something for it. And I mean, it was just a big thing. And especially that I had gotten that A in math, because I hadn't gotten any more grades like that. I'd been getting B's and maybe a C or something, I don't know. But I hadn't been getting any A's. But this time I got an A. I changed it from an N to an A. So they signed the report card, and of course went back to Ms. Neely. Well, Ms. Neely, of course, took the report cards, and what I didn't know is that Ms. Neely checked over those report cards, make sure that they were in order, make sure that the signatures of the parents were there, and also to see if there was any problem with the report card. Well, there was with mine. And so she cited that right away. And so she, of course, called Mom. And that didn't go too good.
Yeah,
That didn't go too good. Mother,
now, what grade? That was the third grade?
I was in the third grade. And it didn't go over too well. She was very upset, but she said, "Now your daddy's going to have to take care of this." Well, I knew what that meant. And so sure enough, when Daddy got home, I got a whipping, which was very deserved. So I didn't ever do that again. But I don't know how in the world I thought I was going to get by with that by changing that N to an A when I hadn't even made an A in math.
Ever. You hadn't ever made an A.
Well, not in that subject.
Yeah.
I hadn't made an A. And all of a sudden, I mean, it was hoop, hoop, hooray. You did real good, son. But I didn't do too good. No.
Oh my gosh. You felt bad then, right?
Right, I did.
Yeah.
And then in the fourth grade, that's when I got hit with the 2x4 in a little boy's yard. I don't remember that. I can't tell you all that story about how that went. But I do know that I was over at that boy's yard for a time and got hit with a 2x4. But I
Maybe
also,
that's what's wrong then now.
yeah,
Think?
you reckon so?
You were hit by a 2x4.
Yeah.
Well, what
But-
did the little boy do that
I
for?
don't know. He and I got mad at each other or something. We
And
were
he just picked up
ready
a
to
2x4?
fight. Yeah, he picked up a 2x4.
My gosh.
And the reason I know what happened was because I had to go home. I had to go home, and of course I was crying a little bit. So mother then had to go over. Daddy was still at work, and mother had to come over there and see, what was going on, and confronted the boy with his mother and so on, and said they just got in trouble, and the mother showed my mother what he hit me with.
Gracious.
And I don't know whatever came of that, but let me tell you about the time that I was throwing rocks at another friend, and his name was Russell.
Now, Becky, were you really you were like a mean little boy.
Well, I guess I was.
I mean, you
this
were
was-
just
this
sort
was
of
the
out of
fourth grade
control.
now. And this little boy, we lived there.
Now, what
right
grade
behind-
were you in on this one?
Well, I was still in the fourth grade. This little boy.
This was not a good time for you, right?
No,
the
it
third and
wasn't
fourth
too
grade
good.
were not
It wasn't
good.
too good. But at any rate, this little boy it might have been the same boy. I just can't remember. But he was home there with us one afternoon, and my younger brother was very little. I was in fourth grade. I was 10 years old, I guess.
And you're talking about Bill. He was.
Yeah, Bill
He
was
would have
like-
been 5 years
Well,
old.
he's about 5.5 or 6.
Yeah.
And so Russell had come over, and he and I had gotten in sort of a scuffle, and on the porch there, I remember that. And I had gone right out to the shrubbery bed there and picked up some rocks, and I was going to hit him.
Oh my God.
So I threw a rock or two at him, and of course he ducked. And finally, I threw another one, and he ducked good and hit Bill right in the head.
Your younger brother.
Yeah, and of course his head was bleeding and
Oh
all.
my! How big was a rock?
Pretty good sized rock, pretty good size, and like a granite rock,
Oh my goodness.
and it hurt, I'm sure. Well, he was squalling, and of course I got a whipping that time.
You got what? Now, did your daddy whip you with a belt?
With the belt, with his belt.
He'd always take the belt he
Yeah,
had on
take
off.
his belt off, and
Yeah, I remember my daddy doing that. He'd say, "All right, y'all really asking for it," and he'd undo his belt and jerk it out and make this big scene.
I didn't get that many whippings, but I'm telling you about the ones I did get and I needed. But that was ridiculous. But that didn't keep me from ever throwing rocks again, because then we moved to Columbia. Daddy went to work as a high school league executive secretary of the high school league, and we went to Columbia, and we were living in an apartment first, and there was a big meadow right behind the apartment building where we were living. There was 4 people, quadrangle apartment, and it was a pretty good piece across a little stream back there, and I remember that because that's where I got my first kiss from a girl.
Oh my!
Oh,
And
yeah.
how old were you then?
Well, I was about 11. I was
And
in
she
the fifth
kissed
grade.
you, or you kissed?
I think she more or less kissed me.
Oh.
But that was something else. Okay. Any rate, though, one day, Bill and I were out there, and we were just kind of throwing rocks. We weren't really mad at each other, and he was standing a pretty good distance away. And we said, well, we're just going to throw some rocks at each other. We just got into a little game there, see how many times we could hit each other.
Now, this is kind of a game little boys play, just throw rocks at each other?
I guess so. I mean, yeah. I remember there was a tournament that they had. I didn't participate in that tournament, but
Maybe you should have.
they
You might have-
divided it into two squads, and they asked me that I want to join into the tournament. It was a rock throwing tournament.
A rock
But, yeah,
throwing
but
tournament.
I didn't participate in that tournament. I remember that. I think it probably after this little incident I'm telling you about. But at any rate, my brother and I were out there, and he couldn't throw rocks as good as me. So he was about 5 or 6, and I was 10, And so, but the distance away, I mean, it was a long distance. Well, as fate would have it, I threw a rock and hit him right in the top of the head.
Again?
Again, and it was one of those sharp rocks, because you can't throw those round ones as good as you can, the sharp ones. And so I hit him right on the top, right in the top of the head.
Did it bleed?
Well, of course it bled, and he went
Yeah, 'cause
running into the house.
He was screaming.
Yeah, and the mother was stay-at-home wife, and so she was there. And of course, whenever he came running in, I came running in behind him, because I knew I'd done wrong. And I was trying to explain that we had gotten a way apart, distance apart, and we shouldn't have ever hit each other, because we couldn't have thrown it that far, but somehow I did. And so that didn't go over too well with her either, and I got another whipping. So Daddy came home and gave me another whipping for throwing rocks. So that, those were days when
All you had to
I
play
can't-
with was rocks?
well, we were always looking for something to do, but something, we just got in some mischief. It's kind of like I was telling you about that time that I got expelled. I've already told you about that. But it was always I was getting into some kind of little mischief. But then, after a while, you want me to tell them about the going to work with Edens?
Yeah, tell them
Well-
about that. Because that's kind of unusual.
Right. Well, I've already told you a little bit about that I had a motorbike and all that. But Daddy,
But this was before the motorbike, wasn't it?
right, this was before the motorbike.
Now, do you think maybe your daddy kind of wanted you to get a job so you could kind of stay out of trouble, maybe?
I think so, really. I think so, because I was one to sort of find some trouble somewhere.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. And so, at any rate, Daddy decided that it was time for me to go to work.
And you were 12,
Right. And so I didn't go down there and apply for the job myself. He took me down there. And he explained to Mr. Sims, he said, this boy needs a job. And I think he can do good, because he does a lot of work around the house.
Did you do a lot of work?
Yeah, well, a lot of times I did it because I was being disciplined to do something, because I was probably picking on Bill. I was always picking on Bill. And he would start crying, and then I'd get in trouble. At any rate, some of those things weren't my fault. I mean,
It sounds to me like there may be a lot of them were your fault, because you were, what, 5 years older than him?
Yeah. But at any rate, Daddy takes me down there and says, this boy needs a job. He was kind of provoked about something anyway. But Mr. Sims looked at me and said, well, how old are you, son? And I said, well, I'm 12 years old. He said, well, you're mighty young. I said, but I tell you what, I've been knowing your daddy now. We've been trading there at Edens for some time. I've been knowing your daddy now for some time. Says, we're going to give you a job, bag boy. And I remember it quite well. I got $5.50 on Saturday. That's when I was working. $5.50 is what my pay was on Saturday.
So this would have been about 1950? Yeah.
Let's see.
12 years old.
Yeah, that's right. It
1950.
was I think it was that same year that I got in trouble there being expelled,
Yeah.
But at any rate, I started working when I was 12, and then sometimes he would let me work on Friday afternoon when he needed me. And whenever I got to work on Friday afternoon and evening, I got a check or I didn't get a check. I got money in my little
Did they give you a
pouch,
little
like,
envelope, right?
little envelope,
Yeah.
$8.37. I remember I think they were taking out Social Security.
They were?
I think. Well, they were taking something out.
Maybe it was just state tax or
But
something.
$8.37.
First of all, I didn't think you could work when you were, I guess back then you could work
Well,
that young.
evidently we could, because I went to work. But at any rate, I worked there at Edens for 4 or 5 years. I mean, really I did until I got the job at the shoe store. You want me to tell you about that one?
Yeah, I don't know how long this video is going to be, but they've been asking for stories, so go ahead.
Well, I went to work for Maryland Shoe Store.
Now I remember a Maryland shoe store.
Right. And it was cheaper shoes, but sold a lot of shoes. Anyway, I went up there, and Daddy, I think, took me up there.
Now, how old were you then?
I was probably 15 or 16. I mean, it was something along in there. And I worked for Maryland's for a couple of years, too, until I got to college. And at any rate, I might have worked on a little bit longer than that, to tell you the truth. But at any rate, when I first started, I remember Mr. Hodges was the manager, just like yesterday. Daddy carried me in there again, and he says, well, yeah, I'll give you a try. He
Now,
said,
how far was this from where y'all lived?
well, this was still down in the Valley Park area.
So
So
how
it
long
wasn't-
did it take? I mean, did you have to? How did you get to work?
No, wait a minute. When I went to work uptown, no, I already had my motorbike then.
Oh, okay.
All
So
right,
is that what you
and-
rode to work?
No, I'm thinking now that, we could get a car, we could drive a car at age 14 in South Carolina. So
Really?
I think that I was allowed to drive the car uptown. I'm pretty sure that's the way it was. Although, they may have taken me a time or two, but I really think I was driving. I really think I was driving. Well, I see I've got a customer here. Got a little dog, a little Steely. Okay, Steely, settle down. Okay, yeah, and I remember very well though that Maryland was some kind of store. I mean, we sold a ton of shoes, and I finally got to where I could do pretty good. But that first Saturday I worked, goodness gracious me, one fellow named Jack was a regular there, and he would jump over aisles. And I think it was close to Easter when I first started working. He would jump over aisles. I've never seen a man jump like that.
You jump over.
Sir,
You mean like the chairs?
Right. Well, no, those aisles where they had the stacks.
Oh yeah.
The shoes were in. They weren't up high. Some of them were, but these were little short stacks. Short shelves.
Yeah.
And shelves. And so he would jump over aisles. But anyway, that first Saturday, I didn't know all the numbering system, and I went the whole day, and I think I made about $6. And I worked hard.
So you worked on commission.
I
However
worked
many
on
shoes you
it was
sold.
6%.
Now, how did y'all do that? Because I remember the Marylands, the guys that would wait on you would be sort of lined up there at the door.
Yeah, they were.
And when you would come in,
and
the first guy in line would be the one who waited on you.
the regulars got the first place in line. They had a little system. They got first place, but we always had to make room for the regulars. But on busy Saturdays, now you can imagine how many shoes Maryland was selling. On busy Saturdays, there were about 2 or 3 of us extras there. And we had to stand in line too, but we couldn't take any of the regulars' places. They had first choice. And so we just stood up there. We were there to get the overflow crowd.
Yeah.
In fact, I waited on Miriam Stevenson one time.
Who was that?
She's Miss Universe.
You're kidding.
Oh yeah, I had a distinction.
She was from South Carolina.
Oh yeah, I
Huh.
had the distinction of waiting on her.
Did
she was
they
very
kid you
pretty,
about that?
Very pretty.
Yeah.
And anyway, yeah, they got all of them about that. But you worked hard to get whatever money we made. I remember eating a 10-cent hot dog on the run.
Yeah.
We worked hard. It was interesting work. I finally, of course, graduated from it and went to college. But it was very interesting. Let me just tell you about a little system they had there. The regulars had this system, and of course they passed it on to us too. And I never will forget one day, this Miss Tuning was a very good sales lady. She sold a lot of shoes. And she was selling, they waited on 2 and 3 customers at the time, all of the regulars did. So we had a system that the number 33 meant that they weren't getting anywhere with the customer. That the customer was either just hard to please or whatever reason, they just didn't feel like they could sell the shoe. So they would call out 33. Well, on this particular day, Ms. Tuning was waiting on this lady, and she'd been waiting on the lady for some time. And so finally she calls out 33. Well, I'm the nearest one to her, so I walked over. And never will forget what Miss Choning said. And said, "Now, ma'am," said, "this is Mr. Stokes," and said that he has had much more experience than I've had. And so I think that he can fix you up just right. And she gave, I took over I sold the shoes.
You did?
Yeah, I sold the shoes. And what it was, I think, more than anything, was I think these regulars had, waiting on 3 at a time and all like that some of these customers kind of got provoked about it. And I didn't have anybody I was waiting on, And so I was able to sell that pair of shoes. But that was an interesting work that we had. But that 33 was a magic number.
So after your dad pretty much got you into working when you were 12 years old, you really did. I bet you didn't get into any kind of trouble after that.
No, I didn't. I think I about had my share of trouble, and he pretty well warned me, not to get in any trouble. But he was glad to see that I was working,
Yeah.
and I went ahead and bought my first car.
You bought it yourself?
Yeah, with the money that I had, and that was right, when I went into the Army.
Yeah.
And those are some other interesting stories, but
Yeah,
I
well,
think we'll probably have to do that another
Yeah,
time.
we'll have to do that another time because this is getting long. All right, so y'all asked for the more stories, and he's got hundreds. Okay, so maybe we'll be back again.
At Divinity now.
Yeah, I'm gonna make your divinity. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bucky, for the stories. All right, we will see y'all next time.